Welcome to CISO Interviews, where Affinia hosts cybersecurity executives sharing career advice, actionable insights, and tips so that you can enhance your career and succeed as well.
We're very lucky and very appreciative to have Michael Piacente, a returning guest. Michael is the managing partner at Hitch Partners, and he's been a major force in executive search world, specifically as it relates to placing CISOs and other senior cybersecurity executives. We've been fortunate to have several sessions, several interviews with Michael in the past, and those are probably some of the most watched episodes on our YouTube channel. And today, the topic of the conversation is 2025. As many of you are either considering different opportunities or just starting to look at the job market, or maybe just curious about the space, I hope that Michael's session today will provide actionable insights and will help set expectations so your search is effective and not frustrating as be. And specifically on that note, I'm getting fairly frequent comments from all members when they're saying, "Hey, I'm getting frustrated here that it's taking so long, 6 months, 12 months to look for a job. I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong. Please connect me with opportunities." And it seems like a recurring theme, which probably has a lot to do with some of the ways people go about searching for a new role, but also about the expectations. And it's a very fluid environment. And a lot of people have been out of the market for years, sometimes longer. And it's always helpful to hear from someone who is in the trenches and knows what's going on day in and day out. So Michael, with this, can you maybe give us an overview of what to expect in 2025 as far as the job market is concerned for CISOs?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me again. I really appreciate always your support, Amina's support, and the team. I love the Affinia community is always pretty vocal outside of these sessions, so I appreciate that. People come up to me, or I saw your podcast, so I appreciate all of it. Hopefully, I'm adding some value. So, yeah. So to your question, yeah, I always find it surprising. A lot of CISO, the good news and bad news is the CISOs really, and security. I say CISOs. I'm also talking about the highest level security executive or leader in their companies, or even deputies. So it's a more of a conclusive term, but this is the first time in the history of the CISO, albeit a short history, 17, 18, 20 years, where we've actually had more of a supply than demand. It's really the first time ever. And so companies for the last year to 2 years, really more 2 years, companies have been really taking longer to evaluate because they can. They know that there's more supply and demand. It's not a secret. And on a macro level, there's obviously macroeconomic decline that has occurred during this window, which I actually think, if you look at the CISO's positioning, that we've actually made it to the seat at the table, and therefore we're kind of treated like all the other big boys and girls at the table. So we don't have that, I've said this before, like the special flower budget, anymore. Again, good news and bad news, we made it to the table, but yeah, so it's been really affected by the macro economic pieces, and therefore companies are also a lot more cost conscious about their financial health. That this position, when we first started our company, was not seen as always an executive at level position, and therefore now the CISOs are very much fall into that category, and so they have to look at it a little bit differently. So you take the macroeconomic factors and then you combine it with the fact that many companies are hiring their CISO or their security leader for the first time. Couple that with the fact that you have most talent acquisition engines are broken. I'll get more into that too, but remember, the talent acquisition teams have been decimated over the last few years, right? Their teams have gone away. They maybe have one really strong generalist in the group, and then you look at sporadic company growth and activity. It can be downright frustrating. The candidate pool is immense, and it's highly competitive. So those are kind of all the factors. Actually, my team and I calculated in late July, we probably have to look at this number again, but we calculated there's somewhere between 1,800 and 2,100 CISOs on the market, either actively looking because their role was eliminated, consolidated, there was an acquisition, or just, or people just looking because of a slowdown and they see that the grass might be greener somewhere else. So it's a massive number. So if we think about like where 2025 is, I look at it in phases. So we just exited this sort of doom and gloom phase, what I would call like the surface of the moon phase, like nothing's there except for a couple of footprints apparently. And then now we're, it kind of moved pretty solely into this like job posting and grazing phase where there's a lot of new roles. Not necessarily a lot of executive search roles. I'll get into that in a moment, but primarily they're being posted, and if you see a posting, it's most likely, 98% not an executive search, right? It's the internal company running the search on their own, which is much more common than executive search. And so they're kind of going out there for the first time. It's not uncommon that you see what I like to call the knockoff Swiss Army knife. So it's looking for everything in one package, but not really willing to pay the price for a full, Swiss Army knife. So, there's price point issues, there's reporting structure issues, there's scope issues, but sometimes that could feel like if you see a bunch of those all at one time, it could feel, I've heard these comments like, oh, CISO compensation's coming down. It's not. We're just seeing the companies that are really kind of what I would say under the cybersecurity poverty line hiring, and there's just a lot of them because we're in that sort of posting and grazing phase right now. And just in the last couple of months, my team and I have noticed, and also I talk to my competitors a lot. There's some really great competitors out there. If you don't know them, get to know them too. But we collaborate a lot. We compare notes, and we're all starting to see some higher level quality in the CISO and adjacent roles. So I anticipate sort of like by the March and April timeframe, we will kind of officially, hopefully, if things keep going in this direction, we'll officially announce that we're in a rebound state. I don't think we're quite there yet. I think the other factor that comes into play for 2025 is, we just went through a massive election. There's new state legislatures and Congress coming into play, and there's a lot of pressure on the states to push for stronger regulatory and compliance against companies who are not standing up appropriate cybersecurity defenses. And so eventually, not now, but eventually we'll get to a Sarbanes-Oxley type of moment in cybersecurity where the CISO won't be the only culpable executive, but we're probably still multiple years away from that. But we are moving towards that, which I think will help drive 2025 and beyond. So anyway, those are just a couple of points, but happy to answer.
Certainly. Well, thank you. I think it's a very good perspective. I just want to double click on some of the things that you said.
Sure.
You mentioned 2,100 CISOs are currently on the market looking for a job. Are you comparing this to the database of everyone they have in your network? I'm just trying to get to percentage, or is it 2,100 of CISOs of all CISOs, let's say in the US, which I'll probably ballpark at maybe 30,000. So I'm just trying to get a sense of what percentage of CISOs are currently on the market, actively or passively. This is the first question. The second, which is actually also very interesting, you mentioned roles that become available through executive search firms like Hitch Partners or maybe some of the others, and roles that become available through do-it-yourself corporations that put the job on LinkedIn. I know we talked about some of the numbers. I was very surprised when I heard the numbers, and maybe you can talk a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, so so actually our pool of CISOs is nowhere near 30,000. It's closer to like 6,500 or so in the US, that is. So if you look at those numbers, you're looking at about a third of the CISO pool is either actively looking for a role or at least considering another position. So they're either on the market, need to find another job in like those 90 days, or next year at this time, I definitely want to be in a new role or sooner, right? So it's a massive number. We were talking about CFOs in comparison, like we'd be in a massive recession. So, but the CISO is definitely
30% is just absolutely mind-blowing number.
It's massive. Yeah, it's massive. And it's been creeping up. It didn't just like suddenly get there. It's been creeping up. But we can tell, and it's very, very analytical calculation, by the way. We basically go off of those who have called us looking for based on the number of CISOs we have. And so we're talking about hundreds a month, like hundreds a month that contact us, and our competitors too. So it's yeah, so it's a pretty massive number. We expect it to see come down. There's also a large vCISO population now as a result of the lack of full-time opportunities. There's just been so many security programs that have consolidated, contracted. You know, the CISO was in the wrong place in the spreadsheet at the wrong time when the company contracted, as an example. That's happened hundreds of times that we know of. Super sad. And it'll probably come back to get those companies. But for now, we have a shorter term problem, which is helping as many CISOs as we can, being their advocate. As far as the other question was, what? Remind me again. Sorry.
The split between.
Yeah, the split. So one thing to keep in mind is that, you know, executive search, at least in our space, and we've tracked this for a long time, you know, we only see, and I say we, mean collectively, of the executive search groups out there, we're only seeing about 15, maybe 20% of the searches in a CISO market, right? The other 80+% are being managed by the companies directly. They're the ones you see posted. So we actually have a small sampling size. And that's why I always promote people to make sure you're using your network and use it effectively, and use all your network, because, you know, we're a very small sample size. We only run maybe a really great year, you know, 30 or 40 total searches, right? And we speak to 100 or so companies a year, and we realize that a majority of them are, you know, coming to us with a CISO or CISO-like search. And they don't have any C and they don't have any O, as we tell them. So pretty hard to go to market with that. But the point is, we're trying to help them, you know, understand. We get a lot of tire kicking in our business. But yeah, the majority of the searches are not being managed by executive search. It hopefully doesn't surprise anyone, but that's been going on for years. It's no different in any other sector, but in the CISO space, because it's still being defined and still being understood, the percentage of using a company like us to run that search is very small in comparison.
Certainly, it makes a lot of sense. So I want to make sure that the insights that you provide are kind of answering the questions of most people in the audience. And what I've often find very helpful and actionable in our conversations is when you talk about specific tactics or pitfalls and gotchas that people want to look out for. For someone who is just kind of embarking on the job search and thinking like 2025 will be the time frame when they want to find a new job, where they should spend their time, what 2 or 3 things they should prioritize, and what some of the mistakes or issues that you see that people make in your conversations, where people get frustrated down the line. What should people avoid?
Yeah, that's a great question, and there's a lot here, right? So I guess the first thing for me is all about, you know, it's preparation. Be prepared for any situation, right? But is it by failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail? That's what Ben Franklin said. Love that quote. But, you know, first thing is, like, know your resume, know your LinkedIn profile, right? You got to anticipate every question that's going to come to you, know the programs that you managed, know the examples, really practice your narrative, however you need to practice that. Do it in front of a mirror, or you know, in front of a friend, or use a friendly Slack channel group to kind of work through your narrative. But don't chance. You know, when you get into an interview situation, you don't want to chance just pulling a rabbit out of the hat on an example that you might have, because you might stumble on it. It needs to be rehearsed, not too rehearsed, by the way, but rehearsed. But and that's we'll get into the do's and don'ts in just a minute, but that's a big one. Just kind of be prepared, know who you are, and know how you're perceived on the small amount of artifacts that people are going to use to evaluate you on, mostly your resume and LinkedIn profile. Social media, don't ignore that either, beyond LinkedIn. I think, you know, when you're getting into an interview process, you really need to understand the interview process, and you got to ask, right? You got to ask the tough questions. If you're working with someone like us, then it's our job to make sure that you're prepared. It's our job to make sure that you know exactly who our client is. You know, we're specialists, and this is all we do every day. The problem is, as I mentioned, that's only 20% of the time. The majority of the time, you're working with internal talent acquisition, and they have 20 other searches going on. They are not a specific, you know, they don't know what to ask. So you really have to step up and ask the right questions. It's probably one of the biggest faults I see of CISOs. When I ask them what questions they've asked, it's usually very general, sort of happy, interviewee questions that don't want to ruffle feathers. And I think that is the wrong approach, in my opinion. Just don't accept the calendar invite and move on and just get ready. But like, who is on the full interview panel, right? What are the steps? Who am I interviewing next and why? What's the batting order? Who in the business am I meeting? Right. So I see so many just examples of people are like, oh, I didn't meet with the head of product. I didn't meet with the GC. I didn't, and I'm basically meeting with the team and a couple of engineering teams. And I'm like, well, what's going on in the business? And they can't really answer the question. You can learn a lot by the way a company sets up their batting order in an interview. How thoughtful was it? How comprehensive is it? Are these people influencers, or are they basically just trying to weed people out? So really understanding that candidate piece. Is there a homework assignment? Is there an aptitude test, right? When are they going to ask for references? How many people have they interviewed already? I always like to ask that. Where are we coming? Not us, because we're kind of starting from the beginning, but I always like to ask candidates, hey, where are you in the process? Hey, Jim, what order were you? Were you the first? I think I was the first candidate. Well, if you're the first candidate, they're going to take their time. As I mentioned, they have a lot of time to figure out what they want, and they don't know what they want always. Is this replacing someone? Is it new, right? What are the backgrounds of the people you're interviewing with? Don't just look them up on LinkedIn, but mobilize your own network, right? Back channel them. Guarantee they're back channeling you, right? Definitely. So I'm meeting with XYZ, and it looks like you may have worked with them. What do they like? Look at their videos, look at their artifacts. What CEOs have they worked for? And then understanding like the team dynamics as well. Has this group failed and succeeded together? Have they built a product together? Is this the first time a group of strangers are getting together? Where's the board sit in all this? Have they hired this person in the past? So I think for each interviewer, you should definitely come up with, 2 or 3 unique questions. Understand, what success looks like for this. My business partner, Brett, always has a great question, like, what does business success look like to you in this position, 18 months from now, which I love that time frame because it's not too far out and it's not too close. And by the way, most people can't answer that question as an interviewer. So, which is not a problem, but it starts getting them thinking. And it also is a great question to ask. I think with the other things we've talked about in the past, though, with the talent manager and with the hiring manager, make sure that you establish where you are from a compensation perspective early and often. Do not wait until the last minute. I know it's super uncomfortable for some people. They don't want to talk about it. But if I continue to hear more and more horror stories about CISOs going and spending 20 hours of their free time and free consulting hours only to find out that they're $300,000 to $500,000 away from the target. That is easily, seen up front. Like you definitely can prepare for that. And I also think in moving forward, you should prepare for a new sort of era of interviewing, longer cycles, right? We've gone from things getting slower. There's like a 25 to 50% increase in length of interviews going on right now, and probably an 80 to 100% increase in frustration level, right? So waiting around, things could happen, all of these different things. So those are some examples. I mentioned before, be sure to, be prepared to be back channeled, right? That's a pretty common practice right now. People are going to ask about the work you've done, where you've done it, how you did it, how you composed yourself, and those. The do's and don'ts. I think that was one of the questions you asked, like, what are some of the things to prepare for? I think one of the biggest things that I see people making mistakes is they spend too much time getting your resume ready. And I know everyone's kind of grumbling right now, but like, it's really not about your resume. It's about preparing custom resumes. I see this a lot. That's an enormous time suck. Right? So not a waste of time. I get it. Like I understand people need to get their resume ready, and it feels good from a sense of accomplishment. But really, it's about the storytelling. And so many people have a beautiful resume, and then I ask them, "Hey, could you walk me through this program?" And they're stumbling, and it's very disjointed, and it's not fluid. So my suggestion would be, instead of spending so much time on your resume, by the way, we don't use resumes to send to our clients. We build a storyboard. It's really more about matching the priorities of the client to the specific areas of focus for the candidate, as opposed to having them try to figure that out through a resume. We sort of give them a map of it. All right. And so that's why we don't use resumes. But get your narrative ready, right? Really, instead of your resume, you can use your resume as a guide, but make sure you have your storytelling down. If you're focusing on your resume the whole time and you don't really focus on the narrative around it, you might miss a really great story you have on one of the bullet points that someone's probably going to ask you about. And that kind of goes to the theme of like putting all your eggs in one basket. I see some of the mistakes of people only applying for jobs online. And remember what I said earlier, like those jobs are not probably executive search level. Not that they need to be. I've heard some great stories of people getting jobs online. But for the most part, 90+% is a terrible experience. Right? You have ghosting, you have lack of calibration, you have lack of understanding of the position, you're talking to a generalist, so on and so forth. Try to build
some of them, they're not even real. They already have an internal candidate and they're just for compliance, they're just putting in jobs.
Yes.
Not,
yeah. If you're working with a large enterprise and you see, posting for a large enterprise, they probably have at least one or two successors to that individual already identified, but they do want to go outside and look, it makes sense. And sometimes they have to do it, to your point. So yeah, I just be careful with only doing jobs online. I'm not saying you shouldn't, obviously, that if that business wasn't a $1 billion business, I would probably be called a liar, because it's obviously effective for some people. But for this level, you have to remember that maybe meant to spend more time mobilizing your network than actually applying for roles. Try to prioritize your network into who can be an influential introduction. I always give people a test, like find the 50 most influential people in your network, right? They're probably not all CISOs. They're definitely not all recruiters. Find out who they are, where they ended up. They could be salespeople, consultants, CEOs. Find out where they are and let them know quietly if you're confidential looking. If you're not, make sure that they know who you are. But those are a couple of things that I
and to double click on that, on the networking, because it's obviously an amazing opportunity if 85% of positions go directly through do-it-yourself style through corporations, and obviously networking is a great way to get access to them, or at least to know that they're available. It's interesting, a lot of times people think of networking as what these other people can do for me, which I think is a little bit wrong-headed way to approach this. And I think the right way is, what can I do for them, which becomes potentially a huge time suck. Right. So in addition to identifying those 20 relationships that are important, what will be your advice in terms of building the network? Well, they say build it before you need it. What's your advice in terms of how to judiciously identify ways to benefit your network and build it up before you actually need it in a way that's not a massive time commitment?
This episode is brought to you by Afinia, a community where 2,000 CISOs and other senior executives network, learn, and succeed together. To apply for your complimentary membership, please visit www.afinia.com or click the link in the show notes. Now, back to the show.
Yeah, I'm a huge, you and I've talked about this too, both privately and publicly, but yeah, we're all about making deposits, right? You don't make your first withdrawal on the account, the relationship account, until maybe a couple weeks or months into it, or until you've made maybe, my rule is 3 deposits before a withdrawal. So like, in other words, I'm not asking anything from anyone until I've actually shown value. And not that everyone needs to follow that rule, but it is something where they need to. And then some examples would be like, you have a CFO friend or whatever it might be that actually has this position, offer, I'm not a candidate for it, but I actually would love to help kind of drive some examples, or drive some help, some advisory work, some free advisory work, give you a couple hours of my time to help. I'll even interview a candidate for you or whatever it might be, but something that goes above and beyond doing that. I mean, there's, 2 ways to do this. One is, you can do it there's dozens of examples getting involved in an open source project, getting involved in diversity programs. We certainly need much more help in that area from the community. But there's just a lot of different things. If you ever need brainstorming on that, give me a call. I'll give you a list of things that you can go do. And a lot of it depends on the context of the network point itself. Like, what's their position? What kind of role? Sometimes it's just education. Sometimes it's a little bit of elbow grease and rolling up the sleeves and helping them on a project. But I hear great success stories about, I started here doing this one thing, just helping a friend out, and now I have an offer on the table. What do you think of it? Can you help me navigate through this? You usually get into a non-competitive situation in those scenarios, which is good, right? Because you've just taken the 2,000 folks out of the picture because you went above and beyond the call of duty.
For sure, for sure. And kind of going back to your analogy about Swiss Army knife, some people, especially looking at those job requirements, everyone is, well, would I be a fit? Maybe I fit 80%, 90%, and there's this dilemma. Do I want to create a personal brand of a Swiss Army knife, or should I be a scalpel that's only good and building a program in retail, Fortune 500 companies in North America, like very specific, like very, the overlap is like this very tight circle. What's your advice? How to straddle this, being generalist, jack of all trades, Swiss Army knife, versus being the scalpel that's really only the best in the world, but in a very narrow field. How should people think about it?
Yeah, I'm not sure everyone should or will want to take my advice on this, because I'm a little bit more contrarian on this particular point. And it really, if you look at what my partner Brett and I and the whole team have built, we really wanted to focus on a very specific line of sight and horizon of a particular area, almost niche when we first started. Maybe 200 to 300 candidates in the entire country were at what we would call cloud native CISO level, right? Engineering oriented. And so eating our own dog food, I believe that if you can show, and there's all kinds of psychological studies on this too, I can't cite them, but if you can show an individual or a group of people that you're an expert in one thing, it is a lot easier for them to draw the lines of connection that you are going to be very good in a lot of other things that are adjacent. And so I'm a big fan of find your superpower, but your superpower is super specific to your point, right? It's not, when we first started, the superpower was something like, I'm really good at talking to non-technical and technical audiences with great impact. And over time, like that may have been really like a very cool superpower in 2013, 14, 15. In 2024, that is the job, right? That is the job. So it's really not a superpower anymore. That is table stakes. What I think superpower is, like, I've gone through 6 acquisitions and built a blueprint in many different kinds of companies, tech companies and traditional companies, on how to educate all the parties in a common language that we can then take action on risk. And here's an example of 3 examples of how I did it, so that the board can make impactful decisions on budgeting, on even acquisition, future acquisitions, things like that. And so it's the specific area backed up by a ton of artifacts. And that's kind of my philosophy. And we see this all the time. And even with us, we started comp surveys 8 years ago. If I forget, my only plug of this entire session is please go out and complete the comp survey on our website if you haven't already done that. That's it. That's my last plug. But now people, most people, like twice a week, we are kind of helping CISOs, that nothing to do with our jobs, but we're helping them with their compensation offers and their negotiations. And we love doing it. We love helping it. We're not asking for anything, but we have the data and we want to make sure we have it. So that's like something that's adjacent to something that we had done before. And I think CISOs have so many different superpowers. It's interesting. They don't, when I ask people what their superpower is, they really have to think about what that is. But it is something that you are better than 99% of the human population out there. You just have to figure out how to narrate it. And I'm happy to do that with you. My partner is happy to do that. That's what we do every day. So
certainly. Well, I know we have a ton of questions from the audience.
Sure.
Before People shared what they were interested in, and now in chat I see a lot of engagement,
Cool.
so
Cool.
we'll jump to that. But before that, I have two quick questions for you. One is, and it could be sensitive, so if you don't, you can punt it if you want. But my understanding is that you're in the matchmaking business. You're employed by the corporation to put them in front of qualified candidates, and ideally they'll pick one and they'll live happily ever after. So that's kind of roughly. So you want to make sure it's a good match, but you looking after interests of the corporation, making sure they make the right decision. However, from the CISO perspective, and especially probably the companies that you decide not to do business with, what are some of the practices and some of the gotchas that CISOs need to be on the lookout for, either when accepting interviews or looking at the job offers? What are some of the practices and tactics that could be frustrating? And they might not be even malicious, but just kind of the nature of the whether it's internal politics or just messaging or not setting expectations right. What are some of the gotchas that you see that CISOs need to be aware of to make sure that, to your point, it could be a very frustrating process, and what to look out for, what some of the red flags and signs to look out for? That's question number one. And question number two, I know, again, going back to expectations, not everyone understands what you do, and sometimes they think that you're just waiting for a call from someone, and you're there to give them 10 offers, and they'll select the one that's best. So what's the best way to interact with Michael, with Hitch Partners? What's the best way to, from kind of time and expectations, the best way to for CISOs to deal with executive search firms and partners so that it's productive and efficient?
Sure. Yeah. On the first one, I love the second one too. But the first one, I mean, we talked about it a little bit earlier. But is the question how to be prepared or what to expect?
The question is what some of the tricks and some of the plays that sometimes, whether it's not necessarily malicious, but companies that play that lead to frustration in the recruiting process for CISOs.
Yeah, well, first of all, I find that it's almost never nefarious, right? These are just not not aware of what they're looking for. We've shown that it takes about and this is in a totally calibrated environment where we use our ITI, interviewing the interviewers. We've talked about it, where we interview everyone on the an executive panel that's part of this or part of the interview panel. And when we do that, about 70% of the people that we interview kind of aren't ready to interview a CISO. They're not. Lately, it's been better, by the way, but for certainly the first couple of years and up until the last couple of years, it was pretty abysmal. Like my team and I are like training people on how to interview CISOs. Like they don't know what they're because you ask them like, what's success look like in 18 months? So I imagine it'll be like, well, we don't want to be breached. I'm like, that is not an answer. That is not. It's like, first of all, that's not possible because it's not one person's agenda. It's a program.
It's not a guarantee either.
What's that?
It's not a guarantee either.
It's not, right? That we do not. That is not what we signed up for. But I think I think outside of not being aware and not knowing exactly what they want and taking a lot of time to, there are some CISOs that have been in this situation. A lot of them recently is like I basically just helped this company define what they're looking for, and they had no intention of hiring me. That is a reality. That's why I always ask, where are you in the batting order, right? And where are you coming in? We also see a lot more ghosting, right? And it comes in different forms, right? People calling us, again, not our clients, but or not, certainly not us. If we ever hear of anyone ghosting in my world, please let me know. There's absolutely no excuse for it. I am like vigilant about that. But we do hear it from our candidates. Like I just went through all this interviews. And then they're just not getting back to me. And they're not getting back to you because they are evaluating other opportunities. Let's call it what it is. Or they've just decided to take a break and they just don't know how to type a 2-minute or 2-minute email to you. Not much of an excuse, but it does happen. I think the other one is miscalibration leading to kind of a change in scope. This happens a lot, even happens on some of our searches, as much diligence we have. one of the biggest things we've seen lately is, oh, suddenly IT is now in the scope of the role when it wasn't when we first started. A lot more change going where the CISO is being hired, realize that the CISO is a formidable executive. And instead of hiring a CIO as a counterpart or an addition, they'll have this person come in and run the business apps and infrastructure. Not unusual. And there's other examples of that too, physical security, privacy. So there's a lot being thrown into the CISO scope, and sometimes it happens while the interview is going on. I'd say a lot of times it happens while the interview is going on. So those are a couple of examples. As far as how to work with us, it's a really good question. I mean, I think it's basic things like just be transparent with your situation, right? Why are you looking? What is your activity? We're the one group of people you definitely don't want to be fluffy with on your answers. Like our job is we're professional risk mitigators for our clients, and we're going to find out what's going on. If you were let go, and like there's no shame. Like we're not here to judge you, right? We're here to help you. And so we want people to be transparent. I will say that 99% of the CISO community is pretty fantastic and is extremely open. But I also will say, like, you got to invest in the relationship. Like, I want to help you. My team wants to help you. My counterparts, and I believe seriously that the people that are doing this full time, like us, our competitors, they want to help too. I want to get to know you. I get a lot of people that say who don't know us, and they're like, "Hey, can I get 15 minutes of your time?" And the answer is no, but it's no because not what you think. It's not. I want to come across as a jerk, but I can't get to know you in 15 minutes, right? I'm not a transactional executive recruiter, right? We meet with 600. I meet with 600 CISOs a year, and on average. And I have regular cadence discussions with many of them. First, it starts, once or twice a month, then moves into monthly, then moves into quarterly. But I wanted to get to know every moment of your career change. That's super important to me. So the way that you can get in touch with us is not like, hey, can I get 15 minutes of your time, which I get probably 30 times a week. It's, hey, here's everything that's going on with me. Here's the latest project I ran. I just had one of these this morning. I was like clapping because the CISO was just like so thorough. Here's everything that's gone on with me. Here's what I'm evaluating. Here's my thought process. Probably took him 10 minutes to write that email, but it was super thoughtful. It was a change of scope. It was a change of executive team, potentially a change of business structure. He laid it all out. I get on the phone now and it's like, all right, let's get down to it, as opposed to like taking the inefficiencies of having to go through that. Just tell me. It's completely confidential. So that's the other thing. I would say that also know what to expect when you call us. To your point, we're not sitting on a couple of dozen searches. Just be like, yeah, Misha's kind of weird. I'm just not going to send it to him. It's not how we operate. We are our business has taken a massive hit over the last couple of years, just our whole sector. And I would say just don't come on too strong. Like I have people write sometimes like, this is my name. This is what I'm looking for. Can you send me all the roles that you have open right now? And I'll let you know if I'm a match. Like these are strangers doing that. And I'm like, yeah, unfortunately, that's not how this works, right? Like this is a relationship. We're in the long-term relationship business. We're not in the transactional. I'm going to send you something. So anyway, those are just a couple of examples.
This episode is brought to you by Afinia, a community where 2,000 CISOs and other senior executives network, learn, and succeed together. To apply for your complimentary membership, please visit www.afinia.com or click the link in the show notes. Now, back to the show.
No, it makes perfect sense. I think it's just kind of calibrating expectations that you'll respond, but you'll not put something in the calendar for tomorrow, but it'll be out. And so it's
sadly, and I'm not proud of this, but like sadly, we're almost a month booked out as far as appointments because we do have some new client activity. We have some event activity. So yeah, it's busy, but we will get you there. I promise. We're not trying to blow you off. It's not our style. We want to get to know you better. We want to get to know your story in advance. It's not that's the other thing. It's not a just-in-time relationship. That's why we don't do 15 minutes. Like I'm not speed dating, right? Like we're in the long-term relationship business. So
for sure, 100%. We have a few questions from the audience.
Sure. Phil,
hi Phil.
Hey Phil.
On the topic of compensation, do you think we're seeing an overall market correction for the CISO role, which I think is probably the ranges are they coming down? or not?
So great question. And hi, by the way. So I don't think we are. My team and I, when we see a very strong CISO role with all the fixings of the right scope and the right reporting structure and the right level of sponsorship and the right level of CISO protection, they're taking it serious. Is it at the seat at the table? We're not seeing a change in that at all. And obviously it's industry dependent. So a lot of industries allow for different structures. But I think, again, what I mentioned earlier is what I think is going on is you're seeing the phase that we're in right now, which is the grazing phase, right? We're seeing a lot of new CISO roles with new companies who have never hired this before, or they're coming off of a compliance manager, director role, maybe. And it's the first time they're hiring. So in their company, this is leveled at XYZ, and which is much, much lower. It's like more like Radford numbers than it is like our comp survey, our competitors' comp surveys. And so it's just an adjustment. But the problem is you're seeing a plethora of companies that are below the security poverty line that are hiring right now. And it makes it look like the entire market is coming down in comp. We do not see that at all.
Interesting. It's more of a fringe.
I think what you're seeing is you're seeing a collection of companies that are in the hiring mode right now, which is a point in time, but not looking at the whole collective market. And the whole collective market has not been affected. In fact, it's probably gone up a little bit. So, and that's unfortunately more and more scope. We joke around that sometimes the CISO, some people have heard me say this, has become the cul-de-sac of technical debt. And so that's not a good thing, but it doesn't mean that the comp has also risen. I think there'll be an adjustment in coming, but I don't think it will be going down. So
certainly. We have another question from John Underwood. What's the average length of the search? So, for example, if I'm deciding now that I need a job, a new role, what's roughly the range of how many months it would take?
Yeah. Hey, John, good to hear from you. I would say conservatively, you're looking at 4 to 6 months right now, right? If you were to start today, obviously that can be accelerated, but just one company that's in the right mindset. But 4 to 6 months, you need about a month or two to build a proper pipeline of activity, different ranges, small, medium, large, public, private, PE, VC, independent, whatever it might be. And then really try to narrow that down to 2 or 3 where you're going to get offers. The offer process, I will tell you right now, is taking much longer to actually process offers. Actually create an offer could take up to 3 or 4 weeks. And that is not normal, but it is happening. Again, companies are being more cautious. So you have to kind of count that in there as well. It's really hard for these companies to sort of align the timing of CISOs and their own executives up. So there's some leeway that needs to happen there. Our average search is about 100 and change days. We've seen a little bit of collapsing of that. So maybe it's hovering around the mid 90s, but it's still around 100 or so. That's how long our searches take from the time that the search starts to offer acceptance. So
I understand. And I guess the last question before I promise it's my last question, and we'll open it to the floor. For someone who's not currently employed in a CISO role, maybe a vCISO, maybe consulting, maybe working with startups or teaching, what's different? Any advice? How can people stay sharp and be ready for the perfect role to come up?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great question. The vCISO one throws me off there because I think that is more of a decision of, do you want to be a long-term vCISO? Is this your career, or are you doing it to gain more experience or to get another view of the market? Like that's a whole other probably podcast or session. But I think in general, I think just making sure that you're mobilizing your network is probably my biggest request or suggestion there, and really like thinking about how you're going to utilize your network. do the brush off of the resume, but again, don't spend a lot of time there. Really focus on what you're like. Think about who you're going to be. Like, what is my superpower, and how can I go get a bullhorn and just tell everyone about that, whether publicly or in my private Slack channels, whatever it is, whatever you feel comfortable. There's not, by the way, there's not one answer for narrating your superpower. It's however, whatever style fits you the best, right? You don't have to go do a panel or write an article or post all the time. It's whatever floats your boat, really. But yeah, those are a few things that just keep yourself sharp. Find the tribe, right? Find your own CISO groups. I think that's really important. But also don't only spend time with CISOs. CISOs are awesome at entertaining other CISOs to a fault sometimes. So making sure that you have a CFO friend or a GC friend, like, hey, can I talk to your groups? Can I talk to them about security, or getting in front of them in other ways? I think it's really important to get yourself across business lines. CISOs are amazing at supporting one another, like incredible. Like there's no other community in business, I will tell you, than the CISOs, even CIOs, right? CIOs, a fair false comparison to the community that the CISOs have built. And I spent 10 years doing nothing but CIO search, and I was trying to be a CIO at one point. So I totally understand CIOs do an incredible job, but nowhere near the capacity that a CISO's community has built. There's just something about
Well,
the
it's a team
sisters and
sport.
brotherhood that they're.
It's a team sport. It's a smaller community, and it's also an adversarial relationship. You're playing against the other team of the bad guys.
Yeah, for the most part. Yeah, it's just incredible, like how much support they have with each other. I think it's pretty special. But
certainly, well, Michael, this is super awesome. If you have a question, just take you off mute and jump in. We have a few minutes left.
Cool.
Hi, Michael, Darren. I don't have a question. I have an observation, an anecdote of how the market is broken. And so a thing happened. Last month, I was filling out an online application for a job that I had heard about through a friend. And it asked a question at the end. Click here if you don't want your resume evaluated by AI or ATS. So I've never seen that before. I clicked there. 14 minutes later, they called me. And I'm in my third round interview with them now. So I just use that as kind of an illustration of, we all know something is broken in employment. And I think I'm going to take that as some sort of tacit corroboration that, yeah, we're relying on computers and AI to write the resume, and they're relying on the AI and ATS to read the resume. We're not connecting.
Love that example. The engine has been broken for quite some time, and it's been broken in different ways, right? Like, and by the way, as a candidate, it's hard to understand where that broken link is. Actually, I love the story because it is a story of hope, and that we actually are now using technology to maybe fix this. I still think that talent acquisition, I'm probably one of the biggest, ask my team if you want to get me fired up. It's when talent acquisition doesn't do their job well. So I still think we have a people problem, and that they're overworked. It's not like they're bad people at all. They're really great people. But if you're only relying on the technology, you probably have a problem. If you're only relying on the people, you have a problem. I think somewhere in the middle there, Darren, is a great example. But it's great. It's great to hear that. That's about the quickest I've ever heard the reaction time from an evaluation. So that's cool.
Thanks for sharing. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Hey, Randy Connor here. Michael, I have a question for you. Been on the market for a year now, and I think that's starting to look bad. Any suggestions on that?
Well, you and unfortunately many others are in this situation, and I think it's tough. I don't think that it looks bad. I think that it just needs to be explained. Were you deliberately doing other things to be active in the market? Are you doing CISO work or consulting work or advisory work? I think the story is really there to let people know. It's hard. It's hard to go into an employer and they're asking, so what's with the gap, Randy, right? And then just, I think you just need a story there. It's all about storytelling. I've had people that have had consolidations and their positions been eliminated, and they really don't know how to handle it. And so obviously transparency is the thing you want to go with first. but also like that person took some time to go take on some vCISO programs, immediately had like 7 or 8 engagements, and within like a couple months, and started falling in love with that type of business, and just sort of saw it out for the last 6 months. And when they asked, they're like, yeah, now I have like 6 or 7 companies that I can actually tie together, all different kinds of companies. And that was my path. That was my deliberate path. And the client was like, yep, this sounds great. We're getting a better version of you now that you have more examples. So I think it's just whatever, we can sit and talk on the side on that, Randy, but like, I think it's just whatever your story has been over the last year. It's been tough though. I get it.
I wanted to ask if you are seeing any kind of rise in the qualifications that businesses are looking for. I'm thinking, should I go off and like go get the CISSP? Just considering that the balance between jobs and applicants has changed.
Yeah. Hi, Gary. Good to see you. So this one's tough because on one hand, I think it's really important to continue to self-educate and looking at to continue like making the best version of yourself, right? I'm all for that. I do it myself. We're all trying to have that. That said, on the other side is we have yet to, over 100 searches or so, we've yet to see a client make a decision based on a certification or even like an MBA, which are also really important to get that business view. But I think that if you structure it in a way that is like, look, I want to be known as someone that is, again, towards my superpower, the best at this particular area. And so I'm going to grasp every bit of education and awareness that I can make myself prepared to have this, then that's a good story. Again, back to the storytelling, it's why you're doing it. It needs to be deliberate. It's not haphazard. And so I think that's a great move for you. It certainly cannot hurt as long as you set your own expectations that that's probably not going to be the make or break decision why someone, and I don't think you think that, by the way, but some people do. Some people say, I just went and got this. I should be ready to go. Why is the phone not ringing? And I'm like, yeah, unfortunately, it doesn't work that way, right? Because you got to remember that people on the other side don't necessarily know what they're looking at in the first place. So they don't know to look for that. And it might be, okay, we're going to put you in the bucket now because you do have it. And that might work. But it's a low probability. So.
Awesome. Thank you. Michael, we have one question from Ward here. For someone who's a senior executive, but not at a CISO level, maybe director or VP, and who's looking for this promotion, in the light of qualified CISO applicants for the role, how should people think about positioning themselves to get to the C level eventually?
Good question. Unfortunately, there's no silver bullet magic bean on that one. The thing that we do with our clients is that we immediately show them a specifically calibrated group of candidates that shows, we call it bookending, right? So we look at what, hey, there's a difference between what a client wants, what a client needs, and what a client's going to get. So what they're going to attract, I should say. Get is probably a terse word, but and in the beginning of a search, there's really no flexibility at all. After they've interviewed those 7 folks I mentioned earlier, and the reality hits in, is like, oh, maybe we actually don't need that piece, or maybe we can't afford that piece, or maybe we don't have that piece to, that big chunk. And that's when there's a window to move yourself into, if you're a deputy role, and move. That's on the interviewing side, right? I know your question is really more like, how do you prepare yourself? I think with that one, it's really, making sure what your brand is, what is your specialty, like I'm everything to everyone, security, InfoSec person right now probably isn't working. Everyone's hiring a specialist. And so trying to figure out what your brand is, trying to get CISOs to speak on your behalf of those brand, your current CISO, other CISOs in the market, and then just associating yourself with the business. I think that's the other piece that VP level or deputies, I see them doing a lot of effective work. So finding a program within the business and going, when I'm talking about deposits, making a deposit with the business, like, I see a problem here. Would you allow me to go fix it? Get your approval from the CISO and whoever else in your chain of command, and then just go work on the problem and try to solve it. Probably without a lot of budget to do so and resources, but showing them that you have value, and that grabs the attention, especially if it's revenue generating or could be revenue generating. That's going to grab the attention of the business real quick, and they're going to see you as a business leader and not as the tech guy focused on SecOps, right? So you've got to really open yourself up to that. And by the way, you might fail the first time doing it. So just be prepared for that too. This is a bit of a risk, but those are a couple of things that I've seen that have worked.
Super helpful. Thank you. Any other questions?
Yes, hi, this is Eugene Davidoff, Comcast NBC Universal. I just wanted to thank Michael for his time. For those that are listening to Michael for the first time, I've had the pleasure of meeting him in person in Philly. He's got a lot of podcasts and other free material out there. So thank you for sharing all your insights. No questions, just wanted to say that, a lot of what you're saying is applicable, not only to the CISO level, but also to the level below. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Eugene. I'll be sure to send money to your Swiss bank account for your comments. I appreciate it.
Bitcoin only.
Bitcoin. Sorry, I should have known. Sorry, my fault. My fault.
Thank you.
Very
Thanks.
kind of you.
Any other questions? I know we're coming up on time. It's now or never.
I had a quick question
Not
for you,
never.
Michael. How's it going, Michael?
Hi. Go, Yem.
Let's see. So in general, at least for me, I've been in the market for a little bit. I've been lucky that I've been focused on advisory work, so I get to pick and choose my interviews. But one of the trends that I've noticed, especially in higher level interview processes, and this is true of both companies below that CISO poverty line and above, is that I get into an in-depth process. I describe, outcomes, high-level ideas, and programs only for all those insights to be stolen. And then the role gets downgraded, right, to a different kind of role. And I've seen this play out more and more and more. And so I guess my question is how can CISOs protect their own kind of intellectual property without giving the secret sauce away, only for that outcome to happen where a role gets downgraded in some way?
Super good question, Eric, and good to hear from you. And Eric's right. Like, this is happening more and more. Again, remember, these are companies that don't exactly know what they want. They're not trying to nefariously steal your trade secrets. And I have a comment to this, but I also have a suggestion, right? And so my comment is, it's happening a lot. It's happening a lot more, and you're going to see it happen a lot more as we come out of this kind of doom and gloom phase and into more of a positive, market trend. One thing I would, one trick you could try, and I've seen people do this, is not something I made up, but something I stole from someone else. And that is that, when you're being approached by these companies, quickly do the research on them, try to figure out what kind of CISO they might be looking for without even talking to them. Just sort of anticipate it's going to be a build CISO from scratch. They're probably going to be utilizing my knowledge. They're trying to punch above their weight. Recognize that up front and just say, I'm not a candidate, but I'm happy to help you as an advisor sort of formulate what you're looking for. And that gets you out of the interview loop. It gets you out of the interview being an interviewee, and it gets them to talk in a language that's like, okay, Eric, you're now my advisor. If they realize later that you actually are the right candidate, they will always come back and try to make an offer to you, but you are not now, and you charge them for this, right? You could charge them if you want. You can offer the free advice, or maybe at a certain level. And then if it keeps on going on, it's like, yeah, I'm going to need to be your consultant here. This is what my rate is. I've actually seen this happen quite a bit over the last few years. Certainly some high profile CISOs that are approached, some names you all know, that take these kind of projects on, and they do a great job. And then they go out and help. They even go out and help find the right candidate if it's not them. And sometimes they get an offer. So that's one thing. One thing I would say, and I'm not saying this for self-serving reasons, but there are so many of these examples out there. I would recommend, when you're feeling like you're being utilized, send them our way, right? I'm not trying to build up my pipeline. Like, it's very, very unlikely we're going to convert any one of these companies to a search, like a CISO search. They are just not in, like I said, they don't have the C and they don't have the O, but and that's what we need to do a search. But I will definitely allow them to kick our tires. I want them on the market advertising something that is actually actionable and not a waste of time. I'm so tired of hearing the stories of, even when we say, hey, here's advice that you should look at when you're doing a CISO search. By the way, don't call it a CISO. It's not a CISO. It's not even close. And like 48 hours, they post it as a CISO search. A bunch of CISOs go and apply to it. And then they call me like, what's this search? And I'm like, it's not a CISO search, right? Like, and so, feel free to send them our way. We will allow them to kick our tires all day long and help them at least do a better version of it and maybe accelerate their process.
That's a phenomenal answer. Believe it or not, that's how I get a lot of advisory work today, is exactly that. One last quick comment. My own qualifying process, the number one question I always ask CEOs and boards is, what do you want to do with security? And 99% of the time, people don't know what they can do with it, right? They think of it as a cost center only. And so going through that educational process with people often gets people to understand what a CISO role is and why they need to invest in it. That doesn't mean they're going to turn around and hire me or somebody like me, right?
Right.
So these are some of the challenges I've experienced lately.
Yeah. Eric, that's a great, and I think I said it earlier, my business partner's question, which I love, is, what does success look like for you in a certain period of time? It's the same kind of question. And by the way, this is great for CISOs to ask these kind of questions, because it shows the executive that, like, I'm not just thinking about going and securing the bits and bytes. I need you to think about us as a pure business partner. And I will say that from the time we started our business to now, like, it's 1,000% better. We were also like 5,000% below where we should have been. So we have a long way to go, but it is really, really, I've been so relieved to see when we just had a new search that started. And like talking to the client, like they were very aware of like what a CISO actually did, the different departments, the way it was, and like compartmentalized, what it meant, what a program meant. I was like, wow, like someone give them a cheat sheet, because it wasn't us. And so we're starting to see that better and better. Like that said, there's still a lot of wasted effort out there. So,
sure. Thank you so much. Well, Michael, we're coming up on time. Thank you for being so generous with your insights. Always super helpful. Other than the compensation survey, are there any asks on your side to this group?
No, just be nice to yourselves. Be kind to yourselves. You're in a tough spot. You're not experts at this stuff. This is not your superpower. Looking for jobs, negotiating offers, dealing with broken AI links and everything. So just be kind to yourself. And, just know that this is hard. So that's all.
Michael, thank you so much. Round of applause for Michael, from everyone.
Thank you, everyone. It was really good
to
see you.
Thank you.
Okay. Cheers.
Thanks, Michael. Talk soon. Bye.
If you liked this episode, please subscribe to this channel and visit Afinia.com for more information about your complimentary membership, or click the link in the show notes.